She was left for being too small. Until a giant Comanche built her a cabin, Lyra walked slowly through the endless plains, the wind tugging at her small frame like it wanted to sweep her off the ground. She was too small, everyone said it, and that smallness had made her invisible to the others, or so she thought. The colony's people, tall and strong, moved together in packs, leaving her behind more than once, sometimes forgetting she even existed. The sun burned hot and the dust rose around her bare feet, yet she kept moving. She had no choice. Survival was the only companion she had ever truly known. Her heart ached with loneliness. The voices of others, the laughter and chatter of the colony, seemed like a sound from a distant life. They had left her during the last migration, arguing that she would slow them down. She had heard their words clearly, the echo of their impatience and disdain. She's too small, she'll never survive, leave her. And leave her they had, yet Lyra was alive. Her size, which they mocked, had kept her hidden when predators came near, and had allowed her to slip into narrow spaces that were unreachable for bigger humans. The cliffs and crevices of the plains became her home. The towering rocks shielded her from the wind, the rough stone providing her a place to sleep, and the shadows gave her comfort at night. She had learned to be quiet, careful, and patient. Her small frame, once a disadvantage in the eyes of others, had become her greatest strength. She moved through a narrow canyon, her eyes sharp for any sign of danger. The wind carried distant noises, the sound of creatures she had never seen before but had learned to respect. One rustle of leaves or the snapping of twigs could mean a predator was near. But Lyra was clever. She had spent months learning the patterns of the plains, the hiding spots, the places where she could rest safely. Her hands were calloused from climbing rocks and collecting small plants, her feet nimble and quick. She stopped suddenly. Her heart raced. In the dust, she saw footprints, large, wider than any human she had ever seen. Her curiosity overcame fear, and she followed them. The footprints moved across the plains and then disappeared near a cluster of rocks. Lyra crouched low, studying the marks carefully. They were not animal tracks. They were deliberate, heavy, and purposeful. Something unusual, something different had passed this way. For the first time in a long while, Lyra felt a spark of excitement. Perhaps she was not alone after all. Perhaps someone or something was watching and not with the intent to harm. She crouched behind a rock, peeking through the gap. She did not have to wait long. From the dust and sunlight emerged a figure that made her gasp. It was a giant. He stood taller than any human she had ever seen, his body strong and broad, muscles moving under his skin like living armor. Yet there was something gentle in his movements. He carried a long staff, and his eyes scanned the plains with intelligence and care. Lyra felt fear rise within her, but also a strange curiosity. He seemed different. He did not seem to rush, did not seem angry or cruel. He simply moved with purpose. For days, Lyra watched from the shadows, learning his patterns. He hunted for food, built temporary shelters from the rocks, and moved with a careful respect for the land. She realized that he was not like the other colonists. He was alone, just as she was, and yet he thrived. His size and strength made him powerful, but his movements revealed patience and thoughtfulness. He was not violent. He did not seem to hurt unnecessarily. One evening, as the sun sank behind the horizon, painting the plains in shades of orange and gold, Lyra made a decision. She would approach him. Perhaps he could help her. Perhaps he could teach her what she could not learn alone. She stepped softly from her hiding place, her small feet making almost no sound on the stones. The giant had paused, sensing something, but he did not move toward her aggressively. Instead, he waited, as if expecting her to show herself. Lyra's heart pounded, but she took a deep breath and stepped fully into the open. The giant's eyes widened slightly when he saw her, but then a gentle smile appeared on his face. He crouched low, bringing his towering head closer to hers, careful not to scare her. "Hello," he said in a deep, calm voice. "You are far from others, little one." Lyra nodded, unsure what to say. She had never met anyone who looked at her without judgment or mockery. I was left behind," she whispered. "They said I was too small." The giant's eyes softened. "Size is not weakness," he said simply. "It can be strength. You survive." "That is proof," she blinked. Nobody had ever said that to her before. They had always pointed out her weaknesses, laughed at her, ignored her. But this giant, he was different. Somehow his words made her feel seen. She felt her small shoulders relax for the first time in years. Over the next few days, Lyra cautiously followed the giant from a distance, learning from him. She watched how he found water hidden beneath stones, how he created shelters using the simplest materials, and how he moved through the land with confidence and care. He did not rush, did not panic. Everything he did had a purpose, a rhythm that Lyra had never noticed in the hurried chaos of her colony. One morning, the giant paused and looked directly at her. "You follow me," he said. "Why?" Lyra hesitated. I want to survive." "I want to learn," the giant nodded. "Then you will, but you must do more than watch. You must try. Show me you are clever. Show me you can think." And so she did. Over the next few weeks, Lyra began helping him. Her small hands could reach places he could not. She gathered herbs from narrow cracks, found small animals hiding in rocks, and created little tools from sticks and stones. The giant watched her, offering guidance when needed but never taking control. Lyra began to understand something important. She had value. Her size, which everyone else had mocked, was perfect for the tasks she could accomplish. She realized that her survival depended not on being like the others, but on embracing what made her different. The giant, whose name she learned was Tayan, recognized her potential as well. He was patient, never rushing her, teaching her through example. He built small shelters and simple tools for her, showing her how strength could be combined with cleverness. Slowly, Lyra felt something she had never felt before, belonging. One evening, as the sun dipped low, they sat together on a rock, watching the plains stretch endlessly. "Do you think they will come back for me?" Lyra asked quietly. Tayan shook his head. "Perhaps, but it does not matter. You will not need them. You are learning to survive, to thrive, and to be clever. You are strong in ways they will never understand." Lyra smiled faintly. The wind blew softly, carrying the scent of the plains, of grass and earth and distant flowers. For the first time in her life, she felt safe. She felt capable. She felt ready. The nights were still cold and the days still long, but Lyra moved with a new confidence. She practiced her skills, gathering food, building small shelters, and exploring the crevices and canyons of the plains. She learned which plants were safe, which animals were dangerous, and how to move quietly so nothing noticed her. And Tayan was always near, a silent guardian and teacher. His presence did not frighten her, it reassured her. He showed her how to use her small size to her advantage, how to think creatively when strength alone would not suffice. One day, while exploring a narrow canyon, Lyra found a patch of bright flowers growing from a crack in the stone. She knelt, touching them gently, marveling at their beauty. They were delicate, small, and perfect, just like her. Tayan appeared behind her, not saying a word, just watching. He nodded once approvingly. Lyra laughed softly, realizing that she had found a place in the vast, empty plains where she could belong, where she could grow, where she could be herself. The wind whispered through the rocks, carrying with it a sense of possibility. Lyra's small hands could do what others could not. Her mind, sharp and clever, could solve problems no one else would attempt. And with Tayan by her side, she knew that she would not only survive but thrive. She was small, yes, but small was not weak. Small could be clever, quick, and brave. And in a world that had forgotten her, Lyra was learning to be unforgettable. The plains stretched endlessly before her, a challenge and an adventure. She was no longer just a small girl left behind. She was a survivor, a thinker, and a partner to a giant who understood her. And as the sun set behind the distant cliffs, Lyra felt something she had never felt before: hope. The wind carried a soft chill across the plains as Lyra followed Tayan over the uneven rocks. She had grown used to his presence, yet each time she looked at him, she was reminded of his enormous size. He moved with the grace of someone fully in tune with the land, yet he was immense, towering above her like a living hill. She sometimes wondered how someone so big could move so lightly, so carefully, without crushing the delicate plants and small creatures that lived here. Tayan spoke little as they walked, but his voice was calm and steady whenever he did. "We will make you a home," he said that morning, "a place for you to stay, to feel safe, and to grow strong." Lyra's eyes widened. She had never thought about having a home of her own. The colony had never cared for her, and the cliffs and caves she had used so far were temporary shelters, cold and often damp. A home, it sounded like a dream, but Tayan's voice carried a certainty she could not ignore. She nodded, her small hands twisting nervously. "But how?" "I don't have anything, I don't know how to build." Tayan smiled. "You will learn. We start with small things, then the house grows and you will grow with it." And so they began. The giant carried massive stones and logs, his enormous hands steady and precise. Lyra helped in the ways she could, running ahead to clear smaller rocks, gathering plants and small twigs to make brushes, and finding hidden pockets of clay and soil for the walls. Her size, once a disadvantage, became perfect for reaching places Tayan's large hands could not. Days passed as they worked together. Tayan did not rush her. He allowed her to move at her own pace. Sometimes he would watch her for hours as she experimented with placing stones or weaving twigs into a pattern. Then he would gently show her a better way, explaining how each choice could make the structure stronger or more comfortable. Lyra found herself learning not only about building but about patience. The giant never lost his calm, and she realized that he believed in her. His quiet faith gave her courage. She began to take risks, trying new ideas and experimenting with different methods. Each success filled her with pride. Each small failure was a lesson, not a punishment. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Tayan stepped back to look at the structure they had begun. The cabin was unlike any she had imagined. Its walls rose from stone foundations, strong enough to withstand wind and rain, and the framework included narrow tunnels and compartments perfectly sized for her small body. There were spaces for storing food, shelves made from branches, and hidden nooks where she could rest. Even the roof, which Tayan built with overlapping layers of bark and straw, was designed to let sunlight in while keeping out the rain. Lyra ran her hands over the walls, feeling the smoothness of the stones, the roughness of the wood, and the clever joints that held everything together. She could hardly believe it. "It's amazing," she whispered. Tayan crouched down, bringing his huge face closer to hers. "It is your home," he said softly. "Not mine, yours. You will decide how it grows, how it changes." For the first time, Lyra felt a sense of pride she had never known. This was not just survival, it was creating something beautiful and lasting, something that belonged to her. As the days turned into weeks, Lyra learned more than just building. Tayan taught her how to read the land, to find water hidden beneath stones, to track animals, and to know which plants could heal and which could harm. Her small size allowed her to explore narrow spaces and hidden crevices, and she discovered many secrets of the plains. She brought her discoveries back to Tayan, who nodded and incorporated them into their work. One morning, while exploring a canyon, Lyra found a stream that flowed from a hidden spring. It was small but clear and pure, perfect for drinking and for planting around their cabin. She returned to Tayan, dragging a small branch to mark the path. "I found water," she said excitedly. Tayan's eyes brightened. "Very good," he said. "We will use this. It will make the cabin stronger. You see, your size, your curiosity, it helps us." Lyra smiled. For the first time, she truly understood what he had meant when he said her smallness was strength. She was not weak. She could see things he could not, reach places he could not, and think in ways he had never imagined. Their bond grew stronger each day. Tayan never tried to control her, never spoke harshly or dismissively. He was patient, careful, and respectful, and in return, Lyra began to trust him completely. She shared stories of her past, her fears, and even her dreams. Tayan listened with care, never interrupting, never judging. One evening, as they sat together outside the cabin, watching the sunset turn the plains golden, Lyra spoke quietly. "Do you think I can be like the others someday, strong and brave?" Tayan shook his head gently. "Do not try to be like them. They do not see what you are. You are clever, brave, and patient. You survive. That is strength. That is all you need." Lyra thought about that. She had always measured herself against others, always compared herself to the tall, strong humans who had left her behind. But Tayan was right. She did not need to be like them. She only needed to be herself, and in that, she was already stronger than she had ever imagined. The construction of the cabin continued. Tayan taught her how to use rope to tie logs together, how to make simple pulleys to lift heavy stones, and how to create a small garden near the cabin. Lyra learned quickly, her small hands nimble and careful. Sometimes she would climb high on scaffolding, weaving branches into the walls, while Tayan held the larger beams steady. Their teamwork was seamless, a dance of strength and cleverness, size and skill. One morning, a sudden windstorm swept across the plains. The cabin shook under the force of the gusts, dust and leaves swirling around. Lyra felt fear grip her chest. She ran to Tayan, who was bracing a large beam with his massive hands. "Do not be afraid," he said. "We built this well. It will stand. Trust it. Trust yourself." Together, they secured the loose branches and stones, and by the end of the storm, the cabin was unharmed. Lyra realized that what they had built was more than a shelter. It was proof that careful thought, teamwork, and cleverness could withstand even the harshest tests. Days passed and the cabin grew more complete. Tayan added clever features: hidden compartments for storing food, small traps to warn them of approaching animals, and a simple stove made from stones. Lyra learned to use each part, understanding how her small size made her perfect for using spaces that were otherwise unreachable. At night, they sat together by a small fire, the glow illuminating their faces. Tayan sometimes spoke of the stars above, of the plains beyond the cliffs, and of the quiet beauty in everything around them. Lyra listened, captivated, learning not just survival but wonder. She began to see the world differently, noticing patterns in the wind, rhythms in the movement of the animals, and the way the land itself seemed alive. One night Lyra asked, "Do you ever feel lonely?" Tayan looked up at the stars, silent for a moment. "Yes," he said finally. "Even giants can feel lonely, but I am not lonely anymore, not with you." Lyra felt a warmth in her chest. She had never had someone say that to her before. She had never felt truly understood. And in that quiet moment, she realized that the cabin was more than a home. It was a place where trust, friendship, and respect could grow. The weeks turned into months. Lyra and Tayan continued building, exploring, and learning together. The cabin became a place of comfort and safety, a symbol of what could be achieved when strength and cleverness worked together. Lyra grew more confident each day, learning not only to survive but to thrive. One morning, as the first light of dawn touched the plains, Lyra climbed a small hill near the cabin and looked out over the land. The wind tugged at her hair, and the plains stretched endlessly before her. She felt a sense of accomplishment, a feeling of belonging she had never known. Tayan appeared behind her, his large shadow falling across the ground. He did not speak. He simply watched her, and she knew he understood. They had built something extraordinary together, a home, a partnership, and a bond that could not be broken by size, fear, or the harshness of the world. Lyra smiled. She had been left for being too small, for being different. But now she realized that her smallness was her strength. With Tayan, she had a home, a mentor, and a friend. And with that, she knew she could face whatever challenges the plains and the wider world might bring. The sun rose higher, warming the stones of the cabin. Lyra felt a sense of peace and determination. She was no longer just a small girl left behind. She was clever, capable, and alive in a way she had never been before. And as she turned to Tayan, she knew that together, they could build not only cabins and shelters, but a life filled with hope, courage, and discovery. The plains stretched endlessly before them, and for the first time, Lyra felt that she truly belonged in this vast, wild world. The sun rose over the plains, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. Lyra stepped outside the cabin and stretched, her small body feeling stronger with each passing day. The cabin had grown taller now, with walls sturdy and warm, a roof that kept out the rain, and small windows that let in light while keeping her safe. She ran her hands over the wooden walls, proud of what she and Tayan had built together. It was more than a shelter. It was a place where she belonged, a place that showed what could be done with cleverness and care. Tayan had been quiet that morning, tending to the garden near the cabin. He had carefully planted rows of vegetables and herbs, showing Lyra how to use the small spaces efficiently. She admired how thoughtful he was, considering every detail, and she realized that she had learned much more than building. She had learned planning, patience, and observation. Every day brought new lessons, and she was eager to absorb them all. Lyra noticed a small bird hopping along the edge of the garden. Its tiny beak pecked at the soil, and its bright feathers caught the sunlight. She smiled and crouched low, careful not to frighten it. Tayan appeared beside her, his enormous hand brushing gently against a large stone. "You notice the small things," he said. "That is your strength. You see what others miss." Lyra nodded. "I think I am starting to understand. My size, it helps me notice what is hidden." Tayan looked at her with approval. "Yes, and one day you will use it to do more than notice. You will create, protect, and explore. Your cleverness will be your greatest tool." The day passed quickly. Lyra worked on the cabin's interior, arranging small shelves and drawers, weaving baskets, and testing clever little storage spaces Tayan had built. She learned to use every inch efficiently. Her small hands made her perfect for detailed work, and she felt satisfaction in every small accomplishment. Each shelf placed, each basket woven made her heart swell with pride. By afternoon, the two decided to explore the plains. Tayan wanted Lyra to practice using her size and cleverness in the wider world. They walked quietly, moving past tall grasses and clusters of rocks, observing the movements of animals, the patterns of wind and water, and the way sunlight shifted shadows across the plains. Lyra's sharp eyes noticed tracks in the soil, slight changes in vegetation, and signs of water nearby. Tayan nodded each time she pointed something out. "You are learning quickly," he said. "Soon you will know these plains as I do." Lyra felt a thrill. For so long she had felt invisible, left behind, unimportant. But now she was capable. She could see, understand, and act. Her small size was no longer a weakness. It was a tool, a gift. As they continued walking, they reached a small grove of trees near a creek. Lyra noticed the branches were low, almost touching the ground. She scampered ahead, moving easily among the trunks, while Tayan followed more slowly, careful not to break the smaller branches. Lyra felt joy in her movement, a freedom she had never known. Here, in this quiet corner of the plains, she felt alive in a way she had never imagined. "Do you ever wish you could fly?" she asked Tayan, sitting on a smooth rock by the water. Tayan chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I have other ways to move." "And you can move in ways I cannot. That is your gift." Lyra smiled. She had never thought of herself as gifted before. Always she had been too small, too weak, too overlooked. But Tayan's words made her see herself differently. She was clever, quick, and observant. She had survived when others thought she could not. She had learned, adapted, and grown. They spent the afternoon practicing skills that would help them both in the wild. Tayan showed her how to lift heavy objects using levers and simple pulleys. Lyra tried first with a small branch and then with larger stones. Her small hands could tie knots with precision, weave ropes, and operate simple machines that Tayan could not manipulate easily. Together, they moved rocks, cleared spaces, and tested structures that would make their home safer and more efficient. Lyra realized that her cleverness combined with Tayan's strength made them a powerful team. Alone, they each had limits, but together they could achieve more than she had ever imagined. Her confidence grew, and with it, her sense of belonging. For the first time, she was not just surviving, she was thriving. That evening, as the sun began to set, Tayan suggested they test a new idea. "We will make a watchtower," he said. "Not tall like me, but cleverly placed so you can see far and safely." Lyra's eyes lit up. She had never built anything like that before. She imagined a small platform hidden among the rocks, a place where she could look out over the plains, observe animals, and notice any approaching visitors. They spent the next days constructing it, using rocks, wood, and clever arrangements of branches. Tayan guided her carefully, but most of the work was Lyra's. Her small size allowed her to fit into tight spaces, balance on narrow ledges, and place pieces exactly where they needed to go. When the watchtower was complete, Lyra climbed to the top. From her small perch, she could see the plains stretching endlessly, the sun glinting off rocks and streams. She felt a sense of power she had never known. She was small, yes, but she could see far, understand the land, and act when necessary. Her size no longer limited her, it expanded her abilities. Tayan joined her at the base, smiling up at her. "You see," he said, "your cleverness makes you strong. Not every strength is measured by size." Lyra nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest. She was beginning to understand that strength came in many forms: patience, observation, cleverness, courage, and the ability to adapt. And she had all of these. As the weeks passed, the cabin became more than a shelter. It became a home full of clever designs and practical solutions. Tayan and Lyra worked together seamlessly. She learned to cook simple meals over the stone stove, to store food carefully, and even to make small tools from the materials around them. Tayan admired her creativity, and she admired his patience and knowledge of the land. One day, while exploring a nearby canyon, Lyra found a hidden alcove filled with wild berries and edible plants. Excited, she ran back to the cabin to show Tayan. "Look what I found," she exclaimed, holding up a small basket filled with the harvest. Tayan examined it carefully. "Excellent," he said. "You will teach the cabin to grow. We will plant more, make it sustainable. Your small hands can tend it where mine cannot reach." Lyra felt pride swelling in her chest. She had found food, space, and clever ways to use them. She was contributing to their home, and it felt wonderful. She realized that she had never felt this capable before. She was no longer just a small girl left behind. She was a builder, a discoverer, and a partner. The bond between them deepened. Tayan shared stories of his ancestors, tales of the plains, and lessons about nature. Lyra listened intently, learning not only about survival but about respect, wisdom, and patience. And she shared her own stories, her fears, and her dreams. Tayan listened without judgment, never mocking her small size, never rushing her words. One evening, as they sat together by the fire, Tayan said quietly, "You are clever, strong, and patient. Never forget that. You will do more than survive here. You will grow, and one day you will teach others what you have learned." Lyra felt a warmth in her heart she had never known. For the first time, she felt valued, seen, and respected. Her size no longer mattered. She realized that cleverness, courage, and patience were just as important, perhaps even more important, than strength. The plains were still wide and full of unknown challenges, but Lyra no longer feared them. She had a home, a mentor, and a companion. She had her cleverness, her small hands, and her mind. And she had Tayan, the giant who saw her true worth. Night fell and the cabin glowed with the soft light of the fire. Lyra climbed into her small sleeping space, feeling safe, proud, and hopeful. She had survived, yes, but more importantly, she had grown. She had discovered the power of her mind, her skills, and her courage. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new discoveries, and new opportunities to test her cleverness. But for now, she rested, feeling that for the first time in her life, she truly belonged. She was small, yes, but she was strong in ways no one had ever recognized. And in the quiet of the plains, with the wind whispering through the rocks and the stars shining above, Lyra knew one thing clearly. She was no longer left behind. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The plains stretched endlessly under the morning sun, golden and bright, as Lyra stepped outside the cabin. Her small feet pressed into the warm earth, and she inhaled the fresh air, feeling alive and strong. The cabin behind her stood proudly, a mixture of stone, wood, and clever design, a testament to her growing skills and Tayan's guidance. The garden was flourishing now, the small plants reaching up toward the sun, their roots hidden in carefully arranged soil. Lyra knelt to check on them, brushing a few leaves gently aside, feeling the satisfaction of growth in her tiny hands. Tayan appeared behind her, his shadow stretching long across the plains. He carried a bundle of long reeds, which he laid down carefully near the cabin. "We will add a fence," he said quietly. "Not to keep you in, but to protect what we have grown. Even cleverness must have safety." Lyra nodded. She had learned the value of careful planning and observation. The plains were beautiful, but they were full of surprises. There were hidden dips and small ravines, wild plants with sharp thorns, and creatures that could disrupt their careful work. A fence seemed wise, and she felt excitement at the idea of adding another layer of cleverness to their home. As they worked, tying the reeds together and anchoring them in the ground, Lyra noticed signs of movement farther down the plains. Tiny footprints pressed into the soil, not from the animals she knew, but from something else, something small and clever moving quietly through the grass. She pointed them out to Tayan, her voice low. He crouched beside her, examining the tracks with care. "Humans?" he asked. Lyra shook her head. "I'm not sure. They are smaller than us, but clever, maybe travelers." Tayan's eyes narrowed slightly, but he smiled. "Then we watch, we learn. Your cleverness will help us." For the next few hours, they observed from the cover of the rocks near the cabin. The footprints led to a small hollow where two young humans appeared, looking exhausted and frightened. They were clearly lost, hungry, and unsure of what lay ahead. Lyra's heart went out to them. She remembered how it had felt to be left behind, ignored, and underestimated. "Should we help them?" Lyra whispered. Tayan nodded. "Yes, but carefully. We will teach them, not scare them. Cleverness first, then strength." Lyra approached the humans slowly, her small size making her less intimidating. "Hello," she said gently. "Are you lost?" The smaller of the two looked up, eyes wide. "Yes, we don't know where to go. We were separated from our group." Lyra nodded, understanding all too well. "Come with me. There is a place you can stay." The humans hesitated, clearly afraid. But when Tayan appeared beside the cabin, crouching so that his immense size was less threatening, they realized he meant no harm. His calm eyes and gentle movements reassured them. Lyra led them inside the cabin, showing them the small shelves, clever compartments, and hidden nooks. She demonstrated how to use the garden, collect water, and store food safely. The two newcomers listened carefully, their faces lighting with relief. They had expected hostility or rejection, but instead they found guidance, patience, and care. Lyra felt a warmth in her chest. This was the first time she had shared her knowledge and her home with others, and it felt wonderful. Over the next few days, Lyra and Tayan worked to teach the newcomers the ways of the plains. Lyra showed them how to move quietly through narrow paths, how to notice small signs of water, and how to identify safe plants. Tayan taught them how to use strength wisely, to lift heavy objects carefully, and to plan for challenges. Together, they created clever systems for storing food, keeping the garden safe, and navigating the plains efficiently. Lyra noticed how much the newcomers relied on her small size and quick thinking. She realized that her cleverness was valuable not only to Tayan, but to anyone willing to learn. She felt pride in her abilities and excitement for what she could accomplish. For the first time, she understood that being small did not mean being weak. It meant being capable in ways others could not be. One afternoon, while checking the garden, Lyra noticed dark clouds gathering over the distant plains. The wind began to pick up, carrying the scent of rain and the sound of rustling grasses. She ran to Tayan, pointing toward the horizon. "A storm is coming," Tayan nodded, his eyes scanning the sky. "We will prepare. Cleverness first, then action." They moved quickly but calmly. Lyra led the newcomers to help, showing them how to secure the garden, protect the cabin, and make sure the smaller structures would not be damaged. Tayan reinforced the walls and roof, using his strength to move heavy stones and beams, while Lyra directed the placement of smaller supports, clever braces, and hidden anchors. As the storm hit, the wind howled across the plains and sheets of rain poured down. The cabin shook slightly, but thanks to their careful planning and clever construction, it held firm. Lyra sat inside, watching the rain through a small window, feeling proud. She had helped design this home, helped teach these newcomers, and now watched their work stand strong against nature. After the storm passed, the plains were fresh and glistening, the earth darkened and alive. Lyra and Tayan inspected the cabin, making small adjustments and improvements. "Cleverness protected us," Tayan said quietly. "Your cleverness, you are learning quickly." Lyra smiled, feeling a rush of confidence. She realized that survival was not just about strength. It was about thinking ahead, noticing details, and acting wisely. Her small size had always been seen as a weakness, but now it was her greatest advantage. The newcomers settled into the cabin, grateful for the guidance and safety. They admired Lyra's clever designs and Tayan's strength, and they began to learn quickly. Lyra found joy in teaching, in sharing her knowledge, and in seeing the results of her guidance. She realized that she could make a difference, not just survive. One evening, as the sun set over the plains, Lyra and Tayan sat outside the cabin, watching the newcomers practice moving through the garden and exploring the nearby rocks. Lyra's eyes sparkled with excitement. "They are learning so fast," she said. "It feels wonderful to teach." Tayan nodded, his massive hands resting on his knees. "You are not just surviving anymore, you are growing, and so are they. Cleverness spreads. Strength alone cannot do this." Lyra thought about that. For so long, she had measured herself against others, comparing her small size to the strength of the colonists who had left her behind. But now, she understood that her cleverness, her patience, and her ability to see what others missed made her powerful in a different way. She was teaching, protecting, and guiding others, ways that strength alone could never achieve. Over the next weeks, Lyra's confidence grew. She explored farther from the cabin, mapping the plains, discovering hidden streams, and noticing subtle patterns in the movement of animals and wind. Tayan followed, offering guidance and teaching how to use strength wisely when needed. Lyra began to see herself as a true partner, not just a small girl left behind, but a clever mind capable of planning, building, and protecting. One day, while exploring a narrow canyon, Lyra discovered a series of small caves. The entrance was low, accessible only to someone of her size. Excited, she crawled inside, discovering a hidden alcove filled with edible plants, fresh water dripping from the rock, and smooth stones perfect for building small tools. She ran back to Tayan, her eyes shining. "Look what I found. We could use this space to expand the cabin, create hidden storage, or even a quiet place to rest." Tayan examined the alcove, nodding in approval. "Clever indeed. You are learning to see possibilities others would miss." This is how a small mind can accomplish great things. Lyra's heart swelled with pride. She realized that her small size, once mocked, was a gift. She could access hidden places, notice subtle patterns, and think creatively. Her cleverness allowed her to guide, teach, and protect. She was no longer just surviving, she was thriving. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the stars began to shine, Lyra sat outside the cabin, reflecting on how far she had come. She remembered the day she had been left behind, the harsh words of the colonists, and the fear she had felt. Now she had a home, a mentor, and a purpose. She had cleverness, patience, and courage. And she had proven that small size was no weakness. It was a tool, a strength, and a way to see the world differently. The plains were wide, mysterious, and full of challenges, but Lyra no longer feared them. She had learned to adapt, to plan, and to use her small size to her advantage. Tayan's strength and wisdom complemented her cleverness, creating a partnership stronger than either could have achieved alone. Lyra smiled, feeling hope and determination. The storm had tested their work, the newcomers had tested her teaching, and the plains had tested her courage. Each challenge had made her stronger, wiser, and more confident. She was small, yes, but she was capable beyond measure. As the night settled over the plains, Lyra lay in her small sleeping space, listening to the quiet sounds of the wind and the distant rustle of animals. She thought of the cabin, the garden, the hidden alcove, and the newcomers she had helped. She felt a sense of pride, belonging, and purpose she had never known before. Tomorrow would bring new discoveries, new lessons, and new opportunities to use her cleverness. She knew that challenges would come, but she also knew that with careful thought, patience, and teamwork, she could face them. The plains were vast, but so was her mind, her courage, and her creativity. Lyra closed her eyes, feeling safe, confident, and ready for whatever lay ahead. She was no longer just a small girl left behind. She was clever, capable, and strong in ways that mattered most. And in the quiet of the plains, with Tayan's steady presence nearby, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The morning sun stretched across the plains, bathing everything in warm gold. Lyra stepped outside her cabin, her small hands brushing over the wooden frame they had built so carefully. The cabin now stood complete, strong, and clever in every detail, a reflection of months of planning, learning, and hard work. The garden beside it flourished, rows of vegetables and herbs reaching toward the sun, tended with care by Lyra and the newcomers who had joined them. Every small detail spoke of thoughtfulness, patience, and creativity. Lyra felt a quiet pride. Tayan appeared behind her carrying a bundle of reeds. "We will add the final touches," he said, his deep voice calm and steady. "The cabin is safe, clever, and ready, but safety is never finished. Every place can grow." Lyra nodded eagerly. She had learned from him that cleverness was a living thing, something to nurture, improve, and adapt. She helped him weave the reeds into small screens to shade the windows from the sun and protect the delicate plants in the garden. She worked quickly, her small hands perfect for threading and tying knots. Tayan moved heavy beams and stones, steadying them with ease. Together they moved in a rhythm that was silent, efficient, and powerful. Once the work was done, they stood back to admire the cabin. It was more than a shelter. It was clever and safe, with hidden compartments, clever storage spaces, a small watchtower, and a flourishing garden. It reflected not just their labor, but their minds and hearts. Lyra felt a thrill of satisfaction. They had created a home that could endure, a place where anyone clever enough could thrive. The newcomers approached, eyes wide with admiration. "It's amazing," one of them said, holding a small basket of berries she had gathered. "We've never seen a place like this." "Everything is so smart," Lyra smiled. "It's not just smart, it's designed for living, for thinking, for being safe and clever. You can learn too. You can make your own home clever if you try." The newcomers nodded, eager and inspired. Lyra felt warmth spread in her chest. Teaching them, sharing her skills, and watching them grow had been one of the most rewarding experiences of her life. She realized that her small size, once a weakness, was a gift that allowed her to guide, teach, and protect. Later, Tayan led them all to the small watchtower. Lyra climbed carefully, her small hands gripping the wooden frame, and looked out over the plains. The land stretched endlessly, a mixture of golden grasses, rocky cliffs, hidden streams, and distant forests. From her vantage point, she could see everything, notice small signs of water or movement, and plan clever ways to navigate or use the land. Tayan joined her at the base, smiling up at her. "From here, you can see far," he said. "You understand more than many who are taller and stronger. Your cleverness is your strength." Lyra felt a rush of pride. She had spent months learning, observing, and practicing. Every small detail mattered, and she had learned to notice what others missed. She realized that cleverness, patience, and observation were just as powerful as strength, perhaps even more so. She had survived, taught others, and built a home that could endure. As the days passed, the cabin became more than a place of shelter. It became a hub of learning, exploration, and clever problem-solving. Lyra and Tayan worked together to create small systems that made life easier, safer, and more efficient. They devised methods to collect water, store food cleverly, and even create simple signals to communicate across the plains. Every project strengthened their skills and deepened their bond. One afternoon, while exploring a narrow canyon, Lyra discovered a small grove of wildflowers hidden behind a rocky ledge. She ran back to Tayan, excitement lighting her face. "Look what I found. We could use this to decorate the cabin or plant seeds." Tayan crouched beside her, examining the flowers carefully. "Clever choice," he said. "They will make the cabin not only safe but beautiful. Cleverness is not only about survival, it is about making life better, happier, and brighter." Lyra smiled, understanding. She had thought cleverness was only about solving problems, but Tayan showed her it could also create beauty. Small hands, small size, careful thinking, they could make the world both safe and wonderful. As the days turned into weeks, Lyra noticed the changes in herself. She walked with confidence, thinking ahead and noticing details that others might miss. She taught the newcomers to move quietly, observe patterns, and solve problems cleverly. Together, they explored the plains, discovering hidden streams, small caves, and patches of edible plants. Each discovery was celebrated, each lesson learned added to their growing knowledge of the land. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the plains in shades of gold and pink, Tayan and Lyra sat outside the cabin. The newcomers were playing nearby, experimenting with their own small projects. Lyra's heart swelled with pride and happiness. She had gone from being left behind, overlooked, and dismissed, to being a teacher, a leader, and a clever mind capable of shaping her world. "You have grown much," Tayan said quietly. "Not in size, but in strength, cleverness, and courage. You are no longer a child left behind. You are a force in your own right." Lyra smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "I never knew I could be this capable. I always thought being small meant I would never matter. But now I see that size is not everything. Cleverness, patience, and courage, those are the real strengths." Tayan nodded. "Yes, and you have them all. You have learned, taught, and created. You have made a home, guided others, and thrived. That is what matters most." As night fell, Lyra climbed into her small sleeping space inside the cabin. The fire outside glowed softly, casting light over the walls, garden, and watchtower. She listened to the quiet sounds of the plains, the gentle rustling of leaves, the distant trickle of water, and the soft calls of nocturnal animals. She felt safe, proud, and happy. For the first time in her life, she realized she had everything she needed. A home she had helped create, skills she had mastered, a mentor and companion who believed in her, and friends she had taught and protected. She was no longer just small. She was clever, strong in mind, and capable beyond measure. The days continued with exploration, teaching, and building. Lyra and Tayan experimented with clever ideas, building hidden storage areas, designing small tools to make life easier, and creating signals to communicate across the plains. Lyra's small size made her perfect for detailed work, and Tayan's strength allowed them to accomplish feats together that neither could do alone. Their teamwork had become seamless, a balance of mind and muscle, cleverness and power. One day, Lyra climbed to the top of the watchtower and looked out over the horizon. The plains stretched endlessly, filled with possibilities. She noticed distant streams, hidden groves, and subtle movements in the grasses. She realized she could see patterns that others might miss, predict changes in weather, and find paths through the land that others would overlook. Her smallness, her cleverness, and her courage had become her greatest gifts. Tayan joined her at the base, his massive hands resting on the wooden supports. "You see more than anyone else could. Cleverness allows you to guide, protect, and create. You have grown into a true leader in your own way." Lyra smiled. "I never imagined I could be like this. I always thought I had nothing to offer. But now, I see that my mind, my hands, and my courage are enough." The newcomers gathered around, eager to share their discoveries and learn from her. Lyra guided them carefully, showing them hidden paths, clever ways to store water, and small tricks to make the garden thrive. She realized that her knowledge, small size, and careful thinking could change lives, not just for herself but for others as well. As the sun set, Lyra and Tayan stood outside the cabin, looking at their home. The garden was flourishing, the watchtower strong, and the cabin clever and safe. Everything they had built together reflected their skills, patience, and cleverness. Lyra felt a sense of accomplishment she had never known. She had been left behind, overlooked, and dismissed. Now she was a creator, a teacher, and a clever mind capable of shaping her world. Tayan placed a massive hand on her shoulder, careful not to overwhelm her small frame. "This is only the beginning," he said. "The plains hold more to explore, more to learn, and more to create, but you are ready. You are no longer small in spirit or mind. You are clever, capable, and strong." Lyra looked at the plains, golden in the fading sunlight, and felt a sense of peace and purpose. She realized that her journey was not just about survival. It was about learning, growing, teaching, and creating. She had discovered the power of her mind, her small hands, and her courage. She had learned that size was not weakness, cleverness was strength, and patience was power. As night fell, the cabin glowed softly, a beacon of cleverness and care in the vast plains. Lyra climbed into her small sleeping space, feeling safe, proud, and happy. She listened to the sounds of the plains, the rustling leaves, the distant trickle of water, and the quiet breathing of her friends nearby. She realized she had everything she needed: a home, companions, skills, and courage. For the first time in her life, she knew she was no longer left behind. She was clever, capable, and strong in ways that mattered most. She had survived, thrived, and grown. And in the quiet of the plains, with Tayan's steady presence and the laughter of the newcomers, Lyra felt a joy and peace she had never known. The plains were wide, full of mystery, challenge, and beauty. Lyra had learned to navigate them, protect herself and others, and use her cleverness to create, guide, and teach. She had grown from a small, overlooked girl into a strong, clever, and capable leader. The cabin stood as proof of her journey, a clever home built with care and patience. The garden thrived, the watchtower offered vision, and hidden corners held the fruits of careful thinking. Lyra knew that whatever the plains brought, she was ready. She had the skills, courage, and cleverness to face it all, and as she drifted into sleep, Lyra felt hope, pride, and joy. She was small, yes, but no longer insignificant. She was clever, strong in mind, and capable in ways that truly mattered. And in the vast plains, she had found her place, her home, and her purpose.